With the recent release of the Sonic 3 movie, my love for the franchise has been ignited once again. I've already seen it 3 times. The movie just oozed passion for the series and made me want to go back and play all the games from start to finish. I mean, I've played just about everyone at least once, but there are quite a few that I've never beaten, so I figured why not play them and put my thoughts down into something that could vaguely be considered a script, record, edit, and upload it all to YouTube. What a great idea, I thought, but then I sat down to play the first game and immediately realized once again that the first game in the series, well,
it sucked.
or at least that's what I thought. Now, I've been playing this game since I was a toddler, on a teeny tiny television in my room with an Xbox and a copy of Mega Collection Plus, and for the life of me, I could never get past the second stage of any of the original games. It's safe to say that my indifference for the 2D games of the franchise began here. I've always preferred the 3D games and never understood the appeal the original trilogy had, especially since when I finally got my first 3D Sonic in Adventure 1, I was able to get further than the second level pretty easily, and it's not like I was much older. I was in kindergarten, so I'm like, what, 5? This isn't the first time I will be playing through these games, however. Sometime in 2024, I got on the same idea, but much like a lot of videos I have scrapped since then, I didn't like the way it was turning out. But if there's anything I've learned from this series is to just live life to the fullest, so no matter how this one turns out, I'm gonna post it. Well, sorry for the sappy bit there, let's get into things, shall we? Sega had struggled to capture a significant size of the gaming market in the 1980s. Their home consoles at the time, the SG-1000 and the Master System, were not able to compete with Nintendo's Famicom system. A large part of this could be contributed to Nintendo striking exclusivity deals with other game developers to release their games only on the Famicom. This left Sega to develop most of their stuff themselves, and let's just say Alex Kidd didn't really strike a chord with too many people. The Sega Genesis would then be released a week after Super Mario Bros. 3 with only 2 games at launch, Space Harrier 2 and Super Thunder Blade, the latter of the two also being available on the Master System. Once again, the Genesis is immediately overshadowed by their competitors over at Nintendo. In 1988, Sega of Japan decided enough was enough and they needed a new mascot for the company, and thus began an in-house competition. Sega wanted a mascot that would become iconic, one who would become ingrained in pop culture, one that would become synonymous with their blast processing, and after a few contenders, including one that would later go on to be the base for the design of Robotnik, they decided to go with a blue hedgehog with red shoes, who would then go on to become the famous, and other times infamous, gaming icon Sonic the Hedgehog, who was designed by Naoto Oshima. Now with their mascot dialed in, they needed to decide what to do with him as far as the game went. Yuji Naka, who at the time was a programmer for Sega, had a prototype for a game that revolved around a character rolling into a ball and going through tubes. He would wonder why, as he got better at a game like Super Mario Bros., he couldn't get faster at it. This all ultimately added the fuel to create the beginnings of the lovable Speed Demon. There were some issues with development with that speed, however. Some members of the team found it to be too fast. Sonic would sometimes run through a loop instead of around it. Hirokazu Yasuhara would become the lead level designer and would try to find a balance between the growing base of hardcore gamers and more casual ones by adding small bits of difficulty spikes into an otherwise seamless adventure. As the game got closer to completion, Sega of America started to market the hell out of the new title, releasing all sorts of commercials, and some of these are absolute classics.
I like Genesis, and it costs a lot less.
Wait, kid, that game
I'll
there.
take Sonic and Genesis.
I knew that.
They would also redesign Sonic to make him more suitable for an American audience. Finally, on June 21st, 1991, Sonic the Hedgehog released in the United Kingdom, followed shortly by the USA on the 23rd, and then in Japan and PAL regions the following month, and it instantly became the hit Sega wanted it to be. By the end of that year, the game had already sold nearly 1 million units in North America alone. It wasn't long before the game was being bundled with every new Genesis sold, which catapulted Sega to a 65% share of the European console market, marking the first time Nintendo hadn't been the most successful games console since 1985. Alright, enough about all that. How is the game itself? Is it awesome? Is it rad? Look at him go!
Whoa!
Sorry about that. Now, in terms of the story for the original game, there really isn't much of one, but just so we're all on the same page. Dr. Robotnik has begun to snatch up innocent animals and turn them into his evil badniks. Once Sonic becomes aware of the situation, he sets off to defeat the evil scientists and rescue the animals that have been kidnapped. That's really it. The game itself gives you next to no context, and what I told you is paraphrased from this one small section in the manual that feels like it itself is paraphrasing the story. But oh well. Sonic games have never been known for their story, so it'd be a bit odd if the first game was story-rich. Oh yeah, I'm also going to be playing the original 2D games on the Sonic Origins collection using the classic mode option, and disabling anything that wasn't in the game like the spin dash for Sonic 1 and the drop dash from the other games if it's enabled. Once you press start on that glorious opening menu, you start off with Green Hill Zone, and I mean, what else can I say that hasn't been said already? It is 100% the perfect introductory level. Not even just for the Sonic series itself, but gaming entirely. The vibrant colors of the foreground mixed with the checkers patterned hills and the bright blue sky above, it welcomes you in and embraces you with such a warm welcome that the creators put so much time into getting just right, and they nailed it. I believe that it is almost entirely this level alone as to why Sonic, the game, became as popular as it did. If you had a friend over and give them a controller and they run through Green Hill Zone, there's no way they come out on the other side not wanting to get a Genesis for themselves. Multiple pathways for repeated playthroughs, shortcuts to take to blast through it all faster. This one zone has everything you could want. And that's all without mentioning the absolute masterpiece that is the Green Hill Zone theme. It still has the power to transport me back to those days of playing the game on the Mega Collection and replaying this stage over and over. After beating the 3 acts, all that's left to ask yourself is what's next? How can it possibly get better than that? Which Sega hits you with a "Gotcha, bitch!" and throws you straight into Marble Zone. It's the complete polar opposite of Green Hill. Filled with straight and narrow level design and no branching paths, you're going the same way everyone else is in this place. And everything starts to get so much more annoying. Spikes are everywhere, lava pits, more instant death traps, and it might as well be an auto-scroller considering how much of the time you're standing on these blocks that move forward at a snail's pace. I still can't wrap my head around how this zone came to be with the identity they wanted to go for. You are constantly waiting for the level to allow you to progress. This is also where my most hated enemy in the entirety of the Sonic franchise rears its ugly mug, the Caterkillers. I have never been able to find a reliable spot to jump on its head and kill it. If I don't turn into a ball and roll into its head, then I'm the one taking damage, and yeah.
Skill issue.
But I don't care. Fuck these guys. They're part of the main reason I can never beat Marble Zone as a kid. Well, that and the small jumps you have to make across lava, and the swinging platforms too. Sonic doesn't really accelerate all that fast, making small movements a bit tricky. I don't find him hard to control in general, only in certain spots. And it can feel like you're stuck in quicksand when you need to get moving and he starts crawling forward. For the longest time I hated the song in this level. I found it to be so repetitive and overall just flat out did not like the way it sounded. Now, I don't know if I finally succumbed to Stockholm Syndrome or what, but going through it now, it's kind of a banger. My only wish is that the 4 measures or so around 30 seconds and lasted for longer. That little synth and trumpet hit just the right spots. Like I previously mentioned, early in 2024, I'd gone through the game and starting with Springyard Zone, it was uncharted territory for me. And I remembered hearing the music come on and man, I don't know how else to put it, it puts a smile on your face. It's laid back and carefree and just plain fun. For the actual stage itself, it's alright. It has a lot of stop and go like Marble Zone, but I don't find it to be nearly as unbearable here like it is in that zone. Maybe because there's not a real threat of dying while doing so, you're just in between a few blocks, so who really cares? And to be fair, Act 1 is really the only one of the 3 that is a bit egregious with how many of these there are. 2 and 3 have significantly less. Although I still don't really get why they're here at all. Would normal platforms not have been fine? All it does is slow you down on trying to go up or down. I don't know. You're able to get some really good speed going, and including one of the few areas that you can easily outpace the camera. Overall, it's fine. I don't particularly like or dislike it, but playing through it doesn't make me want to stop playing the game. These little guys that roll into a ball called, oh, rollers. Well, that's easy. Maybe somewhat frustrating as there is no way to interact with them while they're flying at you, but overall, they're not a big deal. Jeez, where do we even start? Too much water? Is that still relevant in 2025? Okay, but for real, a vast majority of the time in the zone you are underwater, moving slow as molasses, and your acceleration is gutted even more than your regular movement. And then there's these platforms that rocket you into spikes that you have almost no time to react to because of how slow you move. Everything compounds on itself, adding up to a giant slog to get through. But honestly, a lot of it isn't even a rage, but just an utter lack of enthusiasm. I don't want to play this. It's not fun. I don't find its change of pace to be refreshing because Marble Zone already does that for this game if you want a zone that forces the player to take it slower. I'm constantly waiting at every air bubble because one wrong step means that I'm not making it to the next one before Sonic suffocates. It also doesn't help that I find the theme for Lavin Zone to be the worst out of the entire game too. It's not exactly terrible per se, and it reminds me a lot of Marble Zone and that it has the section where more synths come in, and I find it to be more enjoyable, but the base of it is what really throws me off personally. To think all of this just because Yuji Naka thought that hedgehogs can't swim. Well, I guess it's better as the 4th zone in the lineup than when it was originally meant to be the 2nd. Yeah, if you thought the transition from Green Hill to Marble Zone wasn't bad enough, imagine it being Labyrinth instead. There's no way they would have been able to sell all those consoles with this being what's waiting just around the corner. Starlight Zone is another okay level. It somehow feels like it goes on too long at points despite it being really short overall, taking less than 90 seconds to beat most acts. This is because it likes to repeat this one set piece over and over a few times while you'll run up a wall and hop on a spring that launches you up and out the other side. It also introduces an enemy that, as far as I can tell from playing through a couple times, cannot be destroyed. Why? Just what the first game needed, another obstacle to slow you down. I do like the aesthetic of Starlight overall. There isn't a lot happening in the background, just the stars. It feels that everything is less blurry in motion because of it, since now there isn't as much stuff my brain is trying to track. The Starlight Zone theme is also pretty chill, kind of the same thing as the art direction of the stage. Not too many layers and pretty bare bones for the most part. I really don't have too much to say about this one because I don't feel too strongly over it one way or another. And last, and certainly least, Scrap Brain Zone. If Lavin Zone is a difficulty spike mostly out of pure annoyance, this place is a difficulty spike from some bullshit. Spikes everywhere, fire everywhere, death everywhere. There isn't a point that I feel like I can hold right on my controller and not run into something. It has the worst of the worst design that can be found throughout the rest of the game, and that is beginner traps. These are the worst part of any of the 2D games. Moments that are specifically designed to get you as a first time player. What's the point of these? To piss me off? Because it's working. It's the very first second of the first act that kills you just for trying to play the game. This doesn't feel like natural progression of the game's difficulty. It's like a Kaizo level where someone asked, how much shit can I throw in but still leave it beatable? Jesus, I'm looking at my script right now and I've already written as much for Scrap Brain as I did for Starlight, and I haven't even gotten to Act 3 yet. You thought Lavin Zone was bad? Well, let's bring it back and get ready for an absolute gauntlet of an underwater section. Platforms that rise up into spikes, killing you instantly, and more spike balls that appear from thin air, praying for a water bubble to spawn so you don't die, spikes that blend into the background leading you to jump into them. And no, the fact there's an alternate path does not make it better. I take that as a sign the developers were like, oh shit, we really should let people skip this section. Its entire purpose is to mess with you, turn everything you've learned since the beginning against you, which is obviously the point of it all, but I find it all to be a bit too much. Then lastly, the final showdown against Robotnik, it's nothing too crazy, which is like the rest of all the bosses throughout the game, which is why I didn't mention them in the zone recaps. You hit them 8 times and then you win. You did it? You beat Sonic 1 and get shown a screen of Eggman throwing some gems back and forth, telling you to try again? Those are the Chaos Emeralds. You can earn each one by going through this giant ring that appears at the end of a level after collecting 50 rings. These are the worst special stages I have experienced in my life. The stage is constantly spinning around you, and the only thing you can do is jump, which leads to stuff like this. All of this to say that the game is okay. I don't find it to be a masterpiece with no flaws, clearly, but I also don't believe that it is completely unredeemable. I always go back and play it. I want it to be as good as I hope it can be for being the first game in a franchise that I love so much, but each playthrough continues to remind me that it simply isn't. My main gripe with this one is that the difficulty doesn't stem from quicker reactions or a more punishing path for not being able to keep on the best one, but just throwing spikes everywhere. It feels lazy. This game still holds a really special place to my heart, but even with that, I would easily recommend countless other Sonic games to be somebody's first before this. Obviously, if you're already a Sonic fan and haven't played this, get your act together, do your homework, and you can really see the foundations for what became so great in later entries. And as a bit of a spoiler for how I feel, this is the worst the classic games ever got. Well, if you stuck around this long, I want to thank you, especially if you're someone who subscribed after my last video. I didn't think getting over 100,000 views would happen, ever, but especially not, on like the first one that I really kind of made in that style. I will try to not leave you with as long of a wait this time, but just in case, I'm not going to give an exact date. Once again, thank you for watching. I really do appreciate it. I cannot stress that enough, and I hope you take care.